Washington Journal continues.
We're very pleased to welcome back to our Washington Journal table on this Friday morning Senator John Barrasso of Wyoming. He is vice chairman of the Republican Conference. That means he's the #2 guy in the Senate Republicans. He's also a doctor. Those of you who watch regularly and have seen him on in the past know that. We're going to be talking to him about the legislative and political situation in the Senate and Congress as a whole. Thanks for being here.
Thank you, Susan.
Well, let me start with the Glenn Hubbard piece in the Financial Times this morning. Headline, "Forget the debt ceiling and focus on the debt." We've got this debt ceiling time clock ticking at us. Where do you think, now that the Gang of Six seems to be on hiatus and we're not hearing anything out of the Biden talks, where do you think this process is going?
Well, that's the right headline. We need to focus on the debt, the amount of money that this country owes, $13 trillion. 40 cents of every dollar that we spent last year was borrowed money, a lot of it from overseas, significant amounts from China. Since the introduction, since you started introducing me a couple of minutes ago, we borrowed another $2 million for every minute that we talk. We're borrowing over $4 billion a day. That adds to the debt, and what the president has proposed continues to add to the debt for the foreseeable future. It's irresponsible and unsustainable. So I think we need a balanced budget amendment to the Constitution. I mean, I'm from Wyoming. Families in Wyoming live within their means. The state of Wyoming balances its budget every year, and Washington needs to take that lesson and live within the means of the country. And once you start balancing the budget, then you start paying off the debt.
The Daily Caller, which is an online news organization which calls itself right of center, has a story today about a new Mason-Dixon poll obtained exclusively by the Caller, which suggests that a large majority of the public backs an amendment to the Constitution requiring a balanced budget. 65% of those responding say they support it, with 27% opposed. Is there one legislatively entered and in the mix right now?
There is actually unanimously co-sponsored by every member of the Republicans in the Senate. We had a press conference, 47 of us, to say we need to balance the budget. And of course, that's something that you put that on the Constitution, has to pass the House, pass the Senate, get out to the states. It's not something that'll happen overnight, because each of the states has to make their decision, yes or no. But for the long-term interest of the country, it's critical. I mean, the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff said that the biggest threat to our nation is our debt. The debt is the biggest threat that we face as a nation. So unless we can get that under control long term, not just the deficit, which is the amount of money that we overspend every year, but that amount gets dumped right on top of the debt, we have to get the debt under control.
Senate had a vote which failed on essentially the House budget plan, the Paul Ryan Medicare proposal as part of it. What is the meaning of the vote that happened this week?
There were 4 different budgets proposed on the floor, including the president's own budget. The president's budget got 0 votes. Not one Democrat in the Senate voted for the president's budget. It's the one that The Economist called a dishonest budget, because it's not realistic. It's now been 2 years since the Democrats have actually had a budget on the floor of the Senate. I want to say, where's the president's budget? Where's the Democrats' budget? All 4 budgets that were voted on, and Paul Ryan got 40 votes on his. All of those votes, Democrats didn't vote for any of the 4. So I'd say you're the party in the majority, president's in the White House of this party. Where's your budget?
We're going to open up our phone lines in a few minutes for your questions or comments on the continuing debate in Washington over federal spending, the role of the debt on our society, and what you think the prescription should be. Senator will also take other questions if you have them as well. The phone lines are beneath me on the screen. We've got different numbers this week, so please pay attention as you're dialing in. And you can also tweet us, and you can send us an email at CSPAN we'll put the email address on the screen. I've all of a sudden had a brain fade on it. Senator, let me ask you about your position on taxes. There seems to be a hardcore group within the Republican Party that for increase in taxes is just a line in the sand. What are your own thoughts on that?
Yeah. Our problem in this country isn't that we're taxed too little, it's that we spend too much. We got to get the spending under control, and that has to be the bigger part of the debate. I continue to meet with people to try to find the best ways to do that. The Vice President is meeting at the White House along with representatives of the Senate and the House on both sides of the aisle, because we need to get this spending under control. Last year we brought in $2.2 trillion and the country spent $3.7 trillion. That's what's that's what's breaking our back. It's the spending. And when you look at what's happened in Greece, I told the president personally that I thought that what's happened in Greece is just coming attraction. What's going to happen in the United States unless we can get the spending under control.
Senator Tom Coburn of Oklahoma, who was a member of the Fiscal Debt Commission and also part of the Gang of Six, he announced this week he was taking a hiatus, not leaving it completely. He's our guest on our Newsmakers program this week, which will air on Sunday morning and evening. Here's one of his comments during that interview.
Why are we not having a budget? I mean, tell me why it is okay for the Senate to not have a budget. But and going back to the majority leader doesn't want the votes because it's hard political votes. The minority leader doesn't want the votes because it's hard political votes. They're sitting there thinking, how do we maintain our positions? How do we maintain our majorities while Rome burns?
Senator?
Well, he's right. Where's the budget? Where are the Democrats? Where's the budget?
But he's suggesting politics on both sides of the aisle. Neither leader wants this because of the politics.
Well, politics is always a part of everything in Washington, but let's get to the reality of the American people, and they want a balanced budget amendment to the Constitution. You just gave me the numbers. What, 65% of Americans say we ought to balance the budget of the country. If they believe we need a balanced budget amendment to the Constitution, that says to me we ought to balance the budget this year as well. There have been so many programs and so many promises made over the years that we need to deal with that. And you mentioned the Ryan budget as one issue, and a big part of that discussion was Medicare. I practiced medicine for 25 years in Wyoming. Take care of lots of folks on Medicare. My mom's on Medicare. My wife Bobby's parents are on Medicare. We need to save and strengthen Medicare. It is the biggest part of our long-term debt, and the question is, how do you do it? I continue to look for solutions. I met yesterday with Alice Rivlin, and she and Pete Domenici, the former senator, and that's a bipartisan group. She had worked in a Democrat administration. Pete Domenici was a senator, Republican senator. They're looking for solutions on Medicare. But anybody that denies that Medicare is a big problem and needs to be fixed, they can use all the scare tactics and politics that they want. The bottom line is you either are involved in trying to find a solution long term for the Medicare expenses that continue to come, or you say, hey, bankruptcy is okay. And there are people that apparently are taking that task. Because to do nothing, you're talking about bankruptcy. We're found now that Medicare is going to be broke 5 years sooner than they thought it was going to be. That's the newest numbers that came out last week. This is in spite of the fact that President Obama got his health care law passed. It's a health care law that takes $500 billion from our seniors on Medicare, not to save Medicare, but to start a whole new government program for other people. So, if I were on Medicare now, I'd say, hey, you got to do something. You got to reform it. You got to save it for the people that are on it now and protect it for the next generation.
The central core of the Ryan Plan is premium support to the concept. So I'm wondering if you support that as the central tenet of reform.
That's part of it. The Rivlin Pete Domenici plan has that as one of the components, and that's something that's been around for a dozen years. John Breaux, former Democrat senator from Louisiana, had that as part of his proposals in 1999. So it's not a brand new idea. The Domenici-Rivlin plan also says for people that don't want that route, they can stay on the traditional Medicare as another option. I like to give people choices. That's what I found as a practicing physician. The bottom line is what American people want is they want the care that they need from the doctor that they want at a cost they can afford. And we know that the cost of medicine is now, even with the Obama health care law, actually worse than it was before the health care law. We know it's getting harder and harder to find doctors, especially if you're on Medicare, because of all the restrictions and the cost controls and this whole new, what I call the rationing panel that is coming out. That's goal under the president's plan is to limit what they pay for doctors. So that's why even the AARP has made some statements about shortages of primary care doctors. And these aren't my numbers. This is coming from the AARP. 28% of urban doctors are closing their doors on Medicare patients. So, if we don't fix Medicare, no matter what they say in Washington, For that senior whose doctor's retired, who then calls around and tries to find another doctor, they're going to have a heck of a time, and they're having a heck of a time right now finding doctors. And that's what people want. They want the care they need from a doctor they want at a cost they can afford.
One interesting read on this morning, and here's a chart that goes along with it, is in the Wall Street Journal, Metascare, The Surprising Truth. This chart is the growing Medicare burden. Medicare is a share of GDP from 2010 through 2080, and you can see how current path is, and if the Ryan plan is implemented, it'll be here, and the Ryan plan with price indexing here. But without any correction at all, you can see the trajectory for this. It suggests in this article written by Thomas Saving and John Goodman, who is director of the Private Enterprise Research Center at Texas A&M University, served 2 terms as a public trustee on the Social Security and Medicare trust funds, writes that almost no one familiar with the numbers thinks that the planned brute force cuts in Medicare spending are politically feasible, and these are the plans that are in the Obama health care law. Last August, the Office of Medicare Actuary predicted that Medicare will be paying doctors less than what Medicaid pays them by the end of this decade. And by then, 1 in 7 hospitals will have to leave the Medicare system. But just suppose the law is implemented as it's written. In that case, according to the Medicare Trust Fund, Medicare's long-term unfunded liability fell by $53 trillion on the day Obamacare was signed, but at what cost to the elderly? Under the new law, the average amount spent on these enrollees over the remainder of their lives will fall by about $36,000 at today's prices. The sum of the money is equivalent to about 3 years of benefits. For 55-year-olds, the spending decrease is $62,000, or the equivalent of 6 years of benefits. So the law, the healthcare law, already has changed the trajectory and will reduce the benefits. So I'm wondering about this concept of saving the Medicare as we know it. It really already is on a path to change.
Well, it's on a path to change, and as you've just read there, doctors aren't going to see these patients. We already have a shortage coming of about 100,000 doctors, about half of that in family and primary care, the other half specialist. Medicare patients are having a harder and harder time finding doctors because if they actually keep the law as signed, all the doctors are supposed to know, even though they're getting paid less now, they're going to get even paid lower than Medicaid. I go to hospitals in Wyoming as I travel around the state. One of the hospitals in Cody said, if they limit it to so much, we just will stop, doing that procedure that we do at the hospital. We'll stop offering that service. So nobody in that community is going to be able to get a given service who's a senior. That's the tragedy of all of this. The president can do his numbers and his charts, but we're talking about real people needing care, wanting to get care, and Medicare, as you just said from that article, is going to be paying doctors less than Medicaid. And right now we know about half of the doctors in the country don't take Medicaid patients. So if you have a shortage of healthcare providers, and the healthcare law didn't really do much at all to help, got a lot more IRS agents, but not a lot more physicians or nurses, people to take care of patients. Who's going to be there to care for patients, especially when they've put Medicare patients on kind of the least likely to want to be seen by the doctor, and doctors are continuing to look for ways to get out of Medicare. The AMA did a study, and it went even higher numbers of doctors who were unwilling to see physicians, and it says see patients on Medicare. So according to a recent survey by the American Medical Association, 60% of physicians are looking for ways to opt out of Medicare because of these cuts. You take 60% of doctors in the country opting out of seeing patients on Medicare. How does that help a senior get the care that they need from the doctor that they want at a price they can afford, whether Washington's paying or not? The numbers are nice, but I'm talking about real people needing care.
We're talking about Medicare because it is a major component of the budget debate. You mentioned earlier that politics becomes part of everything that happens in this town. Last question for me, and we'll get to calls, is what do you think the lessons are from the New York 26 special election, where Medicare became a major focus of the debate between the two candidates?
The interesting turn. There have been so many editorials written about that. Bottom line is, I support the Paul Ryan approach, voted for it, was one of the 40 people that voted for it. That became a major focus of the ads, and you can scare people in this country by being irresponsible, which is what I believe that the scare tactics of the ads did by rejecting the fact that we got a problem with Medicare. by ignoring that and putting their head in the sand. And the bottom line is we have to do something, because to do nothing just bankrupts Medicare that much
So
sooner.
the question is, for the senators in your conference who are up for re-election, do you think any of them will have hesitation watching what happened in New York if they support major reform to Medicare?
Well, you know, the vote in the Senate was actually after that election. I'm up for re-election. I voted for the Ryan plan, and we can go through the list of those that voted. You know, we stood by an approach that I think is a responsible approach. There are other approaches. I mean, obviously that failed, but you have to deal with, I mean, that's the brutal reality is that Medicare is going to be bankrupt in 13 years. More money is going out right now today than is coming in. And it's going to get worse, because when Medicare was signed into law in '65, men were living to their mid-60s, women to the early 70s. Now here we are in 2011. Average life expectancy for a man in this country is 78, for a woman 81. Medicare age is still the same. So you're going to have more and more people coming on, fewer doctors to take care of them, and with these, you know, with the Democrat health care law the president signed, cuts $500 billion from our seniors on Medicare, not to save Medicare, but to start a new government program. It's going to make it harder for our seniors to get care.
Let's go to calls, beginning with Salem, Oregon, for the senator. Doug is a Democrat there. Good morning.
Good morning. I love the soft-spoken voice of him. He's just like, he's like our savior. This is not something that has happened overnight. This is something that's been going on for the last 30 years. Ronald Reagan came out and said that the 9 scariest words in the United States is, "We're from the government and we're here to help." And Rush Limbaugh made the comment that he was their plan was to just dismantle FDR's New Deal. And I'm just flabbergasted as a citizen and a guy that's getting up to go to work in the rain. I'm flabbergasted that all of a sudden this has become such an urgent issue. That's my comment.
Okay. Why is it urgent all of a sudden? Or has it been urgent for a while and the politicians haven't paid attention to it?
Well, they've been overspending. It was the 6th year of warnings now that, hey, this is unsustainable, this is a problem. I think it became more urgent because of a couple things. One is that the president in his health care law took $500 billion out of Medicare, not to save Medicare, but to start a whole new government program for someone else. And then this report that came out last week that said, we were wrong. Medicare is going to be broke even 5 years sooner than we thought, just, 12 or 13 years from today. So you say, what do we have to do long term to save Medicare? You know, the next show is starting at 9 o'clock with Douglas Brinkley is going to be at the World War II Memorial. We had 104 World War II veterans from Wyoming as part of the honor flight here just last week. My dad fought in the Battle of the Bulge. My wife Bobby's dad was in World War II and Korea. For this whole generation, they're on Medicare. They have concerns when I talk to them. We need to save Medicare for the people that are on it now, and we need to strengthen it so that it is there for the next generation.
Next caller is Tom in Richmond, Virginia, an independent there. Go ahead, Tom.
Okay, you referred to the president's budget as dishonest. Who were you to call the president of the United States a liar? Okay, you want to talk about dishonesty. The population of the United States is over 300 million. If I'm not mistaken, the population of Wyoming is less than 1 million. To equate the federal budget with all its complexities and balancing that with the budget of the rinky-dink state of Wyoming is very dishonest. Thank you very much.
Well, actually, what I thought I said, and if I didn't, let me correct it, the Economist, which is an international magazine, referred to the president's budget as dishonest. You know, you talk about Wyoming, and we live and balance our budget every year. I think a lot of states balance their budget every year. Families balance their budget every year. It is the only responsible thing to do for a family, I believe, for states, and Washington ought to do the same thing. We're in a lot of trouble because we have spent more than we have taken in, and I don't put that as a Republican or a Democrat issue. It's an American issue for the government in Washington. From the end of World War II till today, for every dollar that has come in taxes, I think we've spent about $1.17. And last year, for every dollar we spent, 40 cents of it was borrowed. Can't keep doing that. A family can't do that. A state, no matter what the population is, can't do that. And for a country to remain a free and strong nation and a leading nation, you can't owe that kind of money to foreign powers like China. So I'm going to continue to advocate, as I do on the floor of the Senate, for a balanced budget amendment to the Constitution.
Next call is from Satellite Beach, Florida. Matthew is a Republican there. Good morning, Matthew. You're on.
Thank you. I'm in a bit of a unique position because I'm starting medical school in the fall to become a physician, and you guys have sort of covered the challenges that lie ahead in being able to afford to treat my patients, etc. But I want to bring up an issue that the House Republicans passed a bill 2 days ago that included an amendment that banned federal funding of medical residency programs that include abortion techniques. Now, I don't want to become a physician to perform abortions, but I could see a scenario in the future where if I'm an OBGYN and God forbid there's a patient who suffers a medical emergency where she requires an abortion to save her life, and Dr. Barrasso just covered patients being able to rely on their physicians to provide the health coverage they need. How am I to be confident that I will have the proper training to be there for my patient in the future? We Republicans warn about IPAB from President Obama rationing care, but the House Republicans 2 days ago were getting in between of doctor and their patient, and I want to know if Dr. Barrasso will fight any sort of counterpart amendment that's like that in the Senate, knowing the unique position that physicians are in and defending the patient-doctor relationship.
Matthew, before you go, it's just interesting that a young man who is embarking on medical school is watching the legislation and debate in Washington so closely. Given all the changes in the healthcare profession, did you have any hesitations about your career choice?
Well, no, because you don't become a physician to do it for money, but you see what's going on in Washington and realizing what it is you have to do to become a physician and what that profession entails, and seeing how both parties kick it around like a political football. It's really bothersome because you want to do the best for your patient, and both sides are getting in the way.
Thanks very much. I appreciate your call. We should tell people that the senator was an advocate for physicians himself before coming to the Senate. He served as president of the Wyoming Medical Society. So, Senator and Doctor, your response to that caller?
Well, number one, I'm happy he's going into medicine. Sounds very bright. We want the best and the brightest to go into medicine, to be there to provide care for their patients. I was the speaker a year or so ago at the Georgetown University, my alma mater, at their medical school commencement. So I'm delighted to see young people continue to want to go into medicine. It's going to be a different type of medicine. He raised a point about an amendment that I haven't seen the amendment in the House, but I've been saying for many, many years, both as a senator and before that, that no one should come between a doctor and their patient. Not an insurance company bureaucrat, not a Washington bureaucrat, no one. So I'm going to continue to advocate for that position. But I'm happy that he has decided to go into medicine.
Different topic altogether. Washington Post economy page, Obama and GOP turn to job growth. You are a supporter of a number of Republican job plans. What is it that you think will turn the trick in this economy for more jobs?
The number one, I think number one, fundamentally, we need to make it easier and cheaper for the private sector to create jobs in this country. And the regulations and rules that come out of Washington, I think right now, are making it harder and more expensive for the private sector to create jobs in our country. I look at the pain at the pump that families are noticing with gasoline prices up $1 a gallon. Those energy price costs go up for small businesses that are trying to hire. There are rules and regulations coming out of Washington, specifically the Environmental Protection Agency with their issues of carbon dioxide and emissions. Congress defeated cap and trade, or I call it cap and tax. Now we see the administration trying to go with rules and regulations, which will make the cost of energy more expensive there. The you kind of go point by point of what comes out of Washington. And I think the health care law, with all of the mandates and the expenses, now I'm talking for the people that are out there worrying about what's it going to cost to provide insurance for the people that work for them, what's it going to cost? So it's making it harder and more expensive to hire people. So we got to get rid of those. Now, I mean, it's interesting because this administration, Kathleen Sebelius, has granted 3 million waivers for 3 million individuals and families from the health care law. Half of those waivers, about 1.5 million of the people that gotten waivers, get their insurance through union health plans. These are the same unions that lobbied for the Obama health care law, whose websites say, hey, we won, we got the health care we wanted, and then they're turning around and saying, oh my gosh, now we've done what Nancy Pelosi said. First we have to pass it before we get to find out what's in it. We found out what's in it. We don't want it to apply to us. We don't want to live under these mandates where we have to provide each an individual with $750,000 of coverage this year, so please give us a waiver. And she's been handing out waivers, and it seems they go to people that have friends in high places. So those are the things that are making it harder to create jobs in America, and that's why I think Washington makes it worse, not better.
Colleen, Texas, for the senator. Carolyn, Democrat there.
Hello.
Yes, Carolyn.
Yes, I make about $32,000. I'm retired, and I'm on Medicare, and I have a supplement. And I pay over $3,000 a year for that, which is pretty good compared to other people because I was a federal employee. But if I had to pay another $6,000 for my supplement or whatever they're coming up with the Ryan proposal, I simply couldn't do it. It would just devastate me. The other thing is, Republicans are talking about abortion. I don't have a problem. I don't like abortion myself, but why would you cut low-income women and children of millions of dollars to help them out if they have to have babies?
Thanks, Carolyn.
I just think that what you need to do is you need to put taxes back on the table for the rich. You need to cut those subsidies to oil companies. And until you do that, I can't believe you're really serious about fixing the deficit.
All right, Carolyn, thanks for your call.
Well, I mean, I think she makes a good point about the fact that she's paying $3,000 a year, and she has she's living on Medicare, has a supplement, and can't afford the additional expenses that may come across. And this is someone, she's been paying into Medicare her whole life. What we know is absolutely people have been paying in, and over the course of a life, people have paid in over $100,000, about $110,000 in. What we're seeing, though, is with people living a lot longer and through the marvels of modern medicine, that on average people are taking out of Medicare about $300,000. So if you're bringing in this much and spending this much, you say that can't continue long term. It's breaking the system, and that's actually what we have right now, which is fundamentally we have to get the cost of care down. Carolyn is 100% right. It's what the president promised the country in his first speech on the health care law, and why I agreed with him. And then the health care law came out, 2,700 pages, and it doesn't drive down the cost of care. What we're finding out is it actually is making care and the cost more expensive. And that, to me, is one of the big broken promises of the Obama health care law.
Well, here's an email that has a different point of view. Claudia Collier, watching us in Bloomingdale, Georgia, writes, Senator, the reason doctors are refusing Medicare patients is that private insurance pays them more. It's just a matter of greed. Well, what would you do if someone offered you more for a service or product you sold? Greed will always be a factor in private versus public systems. Senator Barrasso, the funding is one solution to the problem as well.
Well, she is right. They pay different amounts. And if you have a shortage of 100,000 doctors in the country, and you look at it and say, all right, who's going to be seen when their offices are full, that's the worry about getting patients with Medicare to be able to find a doctor. But Susan, you had just read an article from today's Wall Street Journal or Washington Post that said under Medicare rates, these hospitals can't even afford to keep their doors open. With what Medicare is paying, it's under the cost of keeping your office open with paying for malpractice insurance, rent, all of the people to fill out the paperwork, people to answer the phone. So when the reimbursement under any program is less than the cost of keeping your doors open, people are going to say, I can't continue to do this. And a number of hospitals, and they're predicting, even the Congressional Budget Office is predicting, that about 15% of doctors or hospitals will not be able to continue.
A related comment, Gene Winkler, Milliken, Colorado. 60% of doctors do not want to take care of people on Medicaid. What does that say about doctors?
It says that doctors at this point, their offices are full. The health care law failed to address the need for additional health care providers, to train more people to take care of our growing population. Look at how many doctors there are in the country, nurses, nurse practitioners, everyone that takes care of patients. Their shortages are going to get worse as we live longer and the population of the country continues to grow.
Here's one more on this, and then I'll get to calls. Lucy Finn Smith says, all you have to do is look at the history of both parties. Democrats started the Medicare program with Republicans and Ronald Reagan and AMA, howling it would be the worst thing in the world. It's an excellent program. All it needs is adjustment and funding. And here's the question. We are about to have a huge baby boom addition to Medicare. Why not allow more people to buy in? No one asked the obvious question. So younger people buying into the program.
Well, Lucy is right about this group of the baby boomers who, when Medicare was started, were teenagers, and now they are entering Medicare at, what, about 4 million a year of people that are hitting Medicare age. That's the question, is buying in at what price? Because, as you just said, adjustments are going to be needed to be able to make this solvent and last long term.
Got to get this call in. It's from Casper, Wyoming. George is a Republican there. Good morning, George.
Good morning, Susan, and thank you, Senator, for your service. Your predecessor was a great man, and I hope you'll rise to the occasion as he did. I've got a couple of questions for you. First of all, we have a surplus in Wyoming because of oil and gas royalties. We have about $6 billion in surplus. Matter of fact, we're paving the roads so many times they're about 2 feet tall. New schools, new firehouses, so most states just don't get that kind of benefit. If we had the Wyoming Oil and Gas Commission getting the royalty from the federal lands, we've got oil wells that are out in the Gulf, been there for 30 years. They paid $1.50 a barrel for it. And, we could balance the budget tomorrow if we went after that oil and went after that natural gas. We've got something like 80 trillion cubic feet of natural gas sitting in wells, but it's not being pumped out. And it's not being pumped out because we need to take the semi-tractor trailers and get them off of diesel fuel and convert them to natural gas, like T-Ben Cookins said. I've got a question for you. When Clinton and Mr. Gingrich got together, they balanced the budget and left a $350 billion surplus. That's before he came into office. Within 10 years with a Republican Congress, and I'm a Republican, but you know what? In 10 years, we spent $12 trillion on 2 wars and tax breaks and let the oil and gas company go away. I do environmental consulting work, the Transocean disaster, the BP disaster, the banking industry disaster. You have to have some government oversight. And when you eliminate that, you end up with those problems. Here's a couple of questions for you, though. Sir, would you go to the president and ask him to convert all of the postal trucks to natural gas? 60% of all of our liquid fuel.
George, you got to go with your questions real quick because we're almost out of time. So besides that question, what else do you have for the Senator?
I'm also partially disabled. I have diabetes, and I get a disability check for $900 a month, but my insulin costs $800 a month. I wish that you guys would go back and means test or cap how much the pharmacies can charge, like the VA. We'll have them bid for drugs. But
okay,
we don't...
George, I'm going to stop you. We got 2 questions there for conversion of postal trucks and other federal fleet to natural gas.
And as he said, he's a supporter of the T-Ben Pickens plan. There's a lot of natural gas out there. We need to find ways to continue to get the gas and to use it, and we need to make energy as clean as we can, as fast as we can, and do it in ways that don't raise the cost for American families. And the natural gas we have in the country helps us quite a bit in terms of trying to work toward our energy security. But we need it all. We need the oil, the gas, the coal, the uranium. We need it. We need the renewables. We need all the energy.
Second question was on means testing for drug benefits.
Means testing is an important thing because the president says we want to tax, millionaires and billionaires. And the question is, and this gets to this question, is an earlier one, is when Bill Gates goes on Medicare, should he be paying the same thing for his Medicare as the lady who we talked to from Texas who gets, what, $32,000 a year. And I mean, that's what means testing is all about. So somebody that has the means of Bill Gates, should he pay more for his Medicare than our caller from Texas on $32,000 a year? I raised that specific issue to the president in a face-to-face meeting at the White House. The president didn't answer. So I think that that's what we need to hear from him. What are his thoughts on that?
That is it for our time. We appreciate you being one of the senators who comes here regularly to take calls from our audience. Thanks.
Thanks, Susan.
And have a good Memorial weekend.
You too.
Appreciate it.